Hello and welcome back here to the latest episode of the Big 12 Huddle. I'm your host, Calvin Alexander here, host of the CGA Tour podcast, the Oklahoma State affiliate for the College Huddle program or network. And I'm joined by my co-host here, Roger Night Bengal on Twitter/X, but from the Knighted Ones podcast, the University of Central Florida or UCF. Um, Collaborator here with the College Huddle and the College Huddle Podcast Network. Roger, how's it going?
It's going great, man. Happy Halloween as we're recording on Halloween Eve. Your apropos colors for your team are the Halloween colors. So congratulations to that. And here to talk a little bit of football and some other things about the Big 12. So super excited to be on again this evening. Thank you, first of all, to everyone who's been tuning in and listening. 1,400 views and counting on last week's episode. So welcome to the family. We appreciate your viewing, and feel free to comment and give us some feedback if there's things that you want to see, and we're here to please.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, send some information to us here. I got the ticker rolling below. And with that being said, as my catchphrase is, I want to ask you here about Big 12 coaches here currently on the hot seat. I know you and I have got something in common with that. Mike Gundy, maybe not on the hottest seat in the entire world, just because he's been at OSU for so long. But no, Gus Malzahn is for sure on the hot seat. At least that's where I classify him. What do you think about Malzahn? And is that kind of the consensus with the UCF fan base?
Well, it's kind of interesting, right? Because at the beginning of the season, we were kind of talking about this right before the season started, and names like Neil Brown, Dave Aranda were definitely on the list, and there wasn't really anybody else. And going into the season, there was a ton of noise around UCF, especially with KJ Jefferson coming in, and where UCF would position itself. There was a possibility when we were talking at the beginning of the season about Utah and UCF being a big game on the Black Friday game. And here we are. So as far as Gus Malzahn is concerned, he's definitely getting heat. He's getting it from all sides. Obviously, the fans themselves are not very happy with the performance of where we're at. We're not happy that our offense has been pretty, from a rushing perspective has been good. It almost looks like you're watching like an Army or Navy team, right? Not a UCF team, but the passing has been putrid. There's not a better way for it. And a lot of that has to do with us trying to find a quarterback. And, at the beginning of the season, we had KJ Jefferson, who was very highly regarded, came off injury, was expected to perform well, has not done so, crashed and burned to the point where he's not even seeing the field anymore. We had, a 4-star transfer, JB from Miami, who played a few games there, but was eclipsed by Cam Ward. He was expected to compete, but he went ahead and transferred to UCF as a backup. We had EJ Colson, who was coming in, very highly recruited 4-star Georgia quarterback. And yet we've played 4 quarterbacks this season and 4 quarterbacks in the last 4 games, right? So that's a really, really, really damning prospect for Gus Malzahn, considered he is known for his offense, right? And from a rushing attack perspective, with the likes of RJ Harvey and some of the other guys, that's been a success. But otherwise, the wins nor the offense has performed as it should. So the fans are upset, clearly, and have been calling for his head. 2 of the major boosters have come out publicly. These are guys who have, donated $5 million and $10 million a piece, right? And they've come out and been extremely unhappy. And we've made a lot of gains when it's come to bigger name boosters that have come in. And then, he got booed at Spirit Splash, which is, during our homecoming week, that's our tradition, that's where there's what we call the reflection pond or reflecting pond right behind Milliken Hall. And the tradition is that they throw rubber ducks out to the student population. They all year round, they can't get in there, but then they run in there after the ducks. And yeah, he got booed. So he got booed by the students again at the last football game. So, it's not a good place to be for Gus Malzahn. And this past week, he, and we can get into that later if you want, but there were some changes that were made, and they were clearly not his choice that they were made. And he's taken a step back again from calling the plays for the offense. So there's certainly a lot of heat from boosters. There's certainly a lot of heat from fans. There's from the students and just about everybody. Um, I don't think UCF's in a position to, I mean, it would be a big hit if we fired him because his buyout. So I don't think we would want to do that, but he's definitely feeling the heat in Central Florida.
Yeah, I gotta say he is somebody who I think fired the defensive coordinator basically to make sure that he wouldn't get fired at the end of the season. That to me is kind of what that seems as though would be the case. Same thing with Neil Brown. We saw earlier this week West Virginia fired their DC as well. I wonder if that's kind of a a nice move of saying, okay, you got one more year after this one, type of deal. You can bring in a new DC and get a new coordinator in the building here after the season, see what we got. But it's not going to keep anyone off the hot seat completely, especially if you keep having a season kind of like this. And that brings me to talk about Oklahoma State, where this season's just bizarre. I mean, 0-5 to open up conference play, homecoming this weekend against Arizona State, which coming into the year was a layup. It was a homecoming type game. And now we're playing Scattaboo and Arizona State's quarterback is back off the rib injury, going to play this weekend here as well too. And I I'm nervous as an Oklahoma State fan, but I also think Gundy's got to be talked about a little bit, at least being on the hot seat here, because really just of this season. Last year was an unexpectedly great season, but there are a couple games last season too, most notably against you guys in South Florida, where there's just kind of some head scratchers in there. And then you go back to 2022, that was a 7-6 season with Gundy, where it was supposed to be a lot better. And we can talk about quarterback play and how that was kind of the issue when we had Spencer Sanders get injured. But all of a sudden, that's kind of a couple years here, 2 out of 3, where we're talking about a woulda, coulda, shoulda, and making kind of, oh, maybe our defense is injured this year or whatever. And I just think Gunning to be talked about a little bit more in that conversation of being on a hot seat, because I do think it's warranted. And I do think a coordinator position will change this offseason. I do not think Gundy will leave this offseason. There's just no way. Um, he's got too much tenure and too much more of a rope here. So to say. The other guy that I don't think we mentioned at all here is Scott Satterfield. Coming into the season, Cincinnati, after going 3-9 last year, I was a little thinking, hey, maybe he'd be on the hot seat, but he's now 5-3 in 5-3 on the on the
Well,
season, and 3-2 in conference play. They're playing incredibly well. They had their best win of the season here earlier this week or two ago.
Scott Satterfield, if I'm not mistaken, he was coaching Louisville last year, wasn't he?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, yes, this is his first year, but this is definitely a guy where I was just thinking, hey, Cincinnati, what are you guys doing? You know?
Yeah, no. I think for me, if we're talking about names to throw around, it would be Neil Brown, Dave Aranda. Sonny Dykes has been getting a lot of heat down at TCU. Lance Leopold, he's not on the hot seat, but he's been feeling a lot of heat considering what they've done this year and some of the other things that have happened around the program, both notably with his wife calling out their fans, etc., and obviously Gus Malzahn. So when we're talking about who's feeling the heat, to me, it's got to be Neil Brown. Neil Brown came into last season really feeling the heat. There was a lot of talk about him getting fired, and this was his, make it or get fired season. They did fairly well last year. They did really well last year, and then had some optimism coming into this year, and have not. I felt a lot better about them than what they've played as well. And we still have to play them at West Virginia. That was one of the games that I called out would have been one of our hardest games of the season. They've got a fairly decent quarterback there. They just haven't played well from a defensive standpoint. Dave Aranda, took back over the defense. That's what he's been known for, is is defense at Baylor. They have the last couple games we picked of Baylor's. I picked Baylor to come out on top, and I thought, did you guys play them last week?
We did. Yeah, we lost
Yeah,
by 10. Yeah,
yeah.
to place.
Sorry, had to throw that in there.
No, it's okay.
But
And also just want to have a total complete accuracy here. Scott Satterfield, this is his second year in Cincinnati. He was in Louisville
oh, it
in
is his second
2022.
year. For
Yeah, it is
some
his
reason, I
second
thought
year.
it was his first.
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
mean, after going 3-9 last year and then finishing 14th in conference, I was a little thinking, hey, maybe, I mean, 3-9 overall, 1-8 in conference. I was thinking a little bit, hey, that never is a good sign. That never means that you're just completely scotch free heading into the next season when you have a season end like that.
No, but I do think that most give at least a year these days. I mean, the coaching carousel has sped up.
For sure, but I mean this would be the second year. So that's all I'm getting at is that I think there'd be some warranted hot seatness this year for Scott Satterfield. But it's a moot point because he's completely worked himself off of that, or at least the team's played itself off of that, however you want to say it, because they're 5-3 and 3-2 in conference. I mean, heading into October, they were a little bit like, well, they beat Houston 34-0. Who knows? And now it's like, oh no, we definitely know Cincinnati's a decent team in the Big 12, and who would have thought it? Who would have thought it?
Yeah. So going back to Baylor, Dave Aranda, I think that the big thing with Dave Aranda, I don't know if he's going to do enough. He's got some wins. That the team has definitely been playing better. They've lost earlier in the season. They lost a lot of close games. So I don't know what Dave Aranda has to do. I don't know what he has to do the rest of the way out, to be frank, to save his seat. He was definitely on the hot seat last year, and I think that continues. But I think, like most of these coaches, what fans, what ADs, et cetera, are looking for are progress. And I do think that Baylor is progressing. The question is, how much of it can he demonstrate before the end of the year? Sonny Dykes, interesting situation with Sonny Dykes. There's a lot of frustration down at TCU right now. Sonny Dykes came into that job, as someone who had offensive prowess, and the team has put up points for the most part, but defensively just hasn't gotten it done. And they had a bunch of injuries the previous season, and then they had the playoff run. So it's a real interesting time. Expectations are high at TCU. If they don't, I don't think he's in any danger at the end of this season. But if they still have a mediocre year next year, there's a big chance, because TCU has deep pockets, and I could see them letting Sonny Dykes go. Gus Malzahn, I don't think UCF has deep enough pockets. So unless it completely goes off the rails, going into the quote unquote softer part of our season, which who thought we were going to say that, ending with Utah, West Virginia, and Arizona, and Utah specifically, this team still has a chance to be 6-6 and go bowling and potentially be 7-6, which is not progress from last year. But the biggest part, I think, and biggest knock on Gus Malzahn has been not being able to pick a quarterback that and being too slow to make changes at the quarterback position, because I expect Dylan Risk to start this week against Arizona, who's more of a pocket passer and looked decent, albeit in the fourth quarter of the game against BYU. But he can pass, and none of the other quarterbacks have demonstrated the ability to pass. So I think of all of them, I think Dave Aranda, Gus Malzahn, and I think Neal Brown. He had that one season where he did well last season, and now if he doesn't finish strong, I think there's a strong possibility he gets fired, because the year before they were calling for his head.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this then. Just who do you think here has a better chance of staying on? And I'll give you their teams they're playing against too, just to kind of bring it full circle. West Virginia, Neil Brown. They've got at Cincinnati this weekend. Then they play Baylor at home, UCF home, and then at Texas Tech. So that's West Virginia's final four teams that they play. And then as far as it goes for Baylor, of course, there's that there's the game this weekend here against TCU at home, and then there's at West Virginia, then at Houston, and then KU at home. I got to think that this sets up really well in a normal season for Baylor, but normal's not the Big 12 anymore, as far as I know it. And Houston's not the worst team in the conference by leaps and bounds. I think it's actually Oklahoma State. And so then you also have Houston, who's kind of scrappy. The KU should be an easy win, but I don't know if we can say anything's easy wins here now. And it's Baylor, so they're not BYU or Iowa State, teams that I would pick easily over KU either. So
I mean,
I
if I
think
had to choose Neil Brown at West Virginia, if he totally crashes, I mean they're 4-4 and 3-2, right? So it's not
yeah, they're not worlds
crazy,
apart. Yeah.
right? So at 4-4 overall for the season, I think West Virginia still has a chance to get a 6 to 8 to 7 win season in 4 games, right? They can still win 6 to 7 games. I think that's enough for Neil Brown to stay at West Virginia. As far as TCU is concerned, they're 5-3 overall, 3-2 in conference. They have a chance to. I think they have a real chance to be an 8-win team as well. So it's really going to depend on how it goes, how it happens down the stretch. I think TCU is going to have an offense. I think as far as schedule is concerned, you said they play Texas Tech towards the end, right? Texas
Mhm.
Tech. Yeah. So when it comes to Texas Tech, I think TCU actually has a chance to beat Texas Tech. Texas Tech has a lot of great offense, but they don't have a good defense. I think TCU has enough of a defense to force some turnovers and make a difference in that game. So for me, I could definitely see TCU maybe pulling a rabbit out of a hat with an 8-win season, but even a 7-win season is going to keep him there. Dave Aranda, I think Dave Aranda, they're 2-3, 4-4 overall right now, which, believe it or not, is a better season. I think they're actually getting better as the season wears on. So I think they have a 5-6 win. They have a bowl. They could very easily have a bowl season as well. If he makes a bowl game, I think he's a-okay. If not, then we may be having a different discussion. Lance Leopold isn't going anywhere because of the season he had before, and he's got a makeup year for next year. But it'll be interesting to see what he has at the quarterback situation. And Gus Malzahn, I think if anything, he's more likely to retire than there is a firing of Gus Malzahn, just simply because his buyout is I think it's going to be something like $12 million. So I don't think that's happening for UCF anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I do want to talk about this weekend's games here. Just briefly recap last weekend's games. It's already said Oklahoma State lost by 10 here to in Waco. It was an away game, so I'm giving that excuse here. But no, I'm just trying to be funny. I mean, it's just a bad loss here overall for Oklahoma State. Lost to Baylor by 10. UCF also unfortunately lost, but we'll just knock our teams out of the way here. But you guys hosted BYU, who's undefeated. Then the other ones here, just real quick, TCU won by 1 against Tech. West Virginia beat Arizona by 5. Utah lost to Houston by 3. KU lost to K-State by 2. And Cincinnati lost to Colorado. Which was the more shocking win/loss of this past week in your eyes?
Wow.
Because I can tell you this, I kind of just I always know the Sunflower Showdown goes down every year for K-State and KU. This is not my most shocking win or whatsoever. Most shocking stat here that I just didn't know off the top of my head is that KU's beaten Oklahoma State more recently than K-State. In fact, by a large margin, because 2022 wasn't that long ago when KU beat Oklahoma State. K-State has now won 16 years in a row. They're licensed. I mean, that was just a great stat overall that I saw, I think, from Bob Trollsby and the Cocaine Willie guys there to give them a shout out. K-State affiliate of the College Channel Network. And the more shocking game here I have the whole weekend is I mean, I gotta say it's Houston over Utah. Utah just I just man,
Yeah,
I
I
had
don't.
been in
I
my
don't.
own little world with Oklahoma State being focused on how all of our predictions, coming into the season were so far off. I hadn't really looked into Utah and really followed up with, man, are they doing without Cam Rising? What's going on there and everything? And now that I am, I'm like, wow, Houston beat you, and they only filled up their stadium with 70% of the people, which is normally for their games. They don't really pack it out there, but still, just crazy in my
Well,
eyes.
the thing that gets me about it, right? And I said this all season long. I mean, you look at and I saw that I think I said this last weekend too. You look at Utah. Utah has essentially or a lot of the team back from last year's team, right? Which is also the team where they had most of the team back from the previous year's team, right? And last year they didn't have Cam Rising, and they were still fine. Yeah, I'm always bullish on teams that can run the ball, do fundamentals well, and have a good defense. And that was Utah's MO, and that's what we were expecting this year. Defensively, they've been pretty good. They just have they have an even more anemic offense than what we do. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to run or pass the ball, and because of that, they're 4-4 and 1-4 specifically in the Big 12, which is interesting. So they're still a dangerous team, but Houston has been terrible. I mean,
And that's the
outright
shocking part to me.
terrible.
Yeah, that's the shocking part. They beat Utah. Like, it's just weird. And
Well, they've
it
won
wasn't
with
just a
defense. They
crazy.
haven't won
Yeah.
with any offense. And Houston's had like no offense all season, even in the big win that they had with that they scored, higher points. It was off of defensive turnovers, right? So they got short fields and they were able to score. It- and they didn't do anything special this game either. They were trailing the entire game and won in the fourth quarter by 10 points. So it was literally 14-7 going into the fourth quarter, and they scored 10 points. But the longer a game goes, and the less points you score and leave Houston in the game, the more opportunities they have to believe in that their defense can make a difference. And that's what happened in this game.
Yeah, it is very bizarre to me because also in this game here you have Utah who plays two quarterbacks. Um and honestly that the other guy here, I'm just going back to it real quick. I just I cannot believe that they are playing Isaac Wilson and another quarterback here this week again, trying to figure it out here of, oh, do we have it or not? For Houston. And Houston just got to him that much. It's bizarre to me because
If you got two quarterbacks, you don't have
we
any
got
quarterbacks.
oh yeah, I mean we Oklahoma State
And
fans
we're
know
the
that from
prime
far away.
example of that, right? We're
Yeah,
the prime example of that.
you
And
guys
I, and
are.
I'll
Yeah.
and I'll say this too. Um, we're gonna start our third string quarterback. That's gonna be
Mm.
our starter this week. So Dylan Risk, but he's more of a pocket passer. They always thought he wouldn't, or technically fourth string quarterback, that he wouldn't make the show because he's not an RPO guy. The read on him was he couldn't run RPO, and get what does Gus like to do? Run, or he runs RPO. Last week against BYU, he was able to throw the ball and demonstrate that he does have that pocket presence and he can pass the ball, and he was able to run as well. It's going to be interesting. I mean, we've had the athletes on paper that should have been successful. I don't know that Utah does at this point. I just at the quarterback position, I don't know that they do. They did last year, and they had a heavy dose of running game. Their offensive line is pretty good. They do good with zones and creating opportunities for their playmakers, especially on the ground. This year, I don't know where that went. It's just not there. So, and with most of the lines coming back too, and that's where games, traditionally everybody says games are won in the trenches. Their lines have largely been the same. So I don't know what's happening with Utah. To be honest, they should be winning more games than they are.
Yeah, it's bizarre to me that they played two quarterbacks last weekend against Houston, Isaac Wilson and Brandon Rose, and I mean, Wilson at least threw a touchdown on 22 attempts and had 170 yards throwing. Rose had 45 yards, 15 attempts, one interception, no touchdowns. And yet, even with those two very different stat lines, both are still getting first team reps this week. So they're not deciding, like you said, just to only emphasize your point more of, hey, if you have two quarterbacks, you really have none. So that was the craziest game of I guess the past weekend here that I just did not see coming at all whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Houston's been bad. Houston's been bad for quite some time here. So for them to beat Utah, which I thought was respectable, is very interesting. Moving on to this weekend's games here and previewing them, we've got K State at Houston, who we just talked about, Texas Tech at Iowa State, Arizona at UCF, Arizona State at Oklahoma State for Oklahoma State's homecoming, and TCU at Baylor. Which which do you see is the easiest? Yeah, they're winning. Like which matchup do you pick and go? You know, I have the most confidence. If I had to put down some money, I no matter what would think this team's going to win. These five
K
matchups.
K K State over Houston.
Okay, yeah, you like that a lot
Yeah.
better, even though they're on the road and Iowa State's at home versus Tech.
Yes. I think Tech. I think Tech has a good offense, and they've been able to score points all season long. I still think Iowa State beats them, obviously, but I've been calling them a paper tiger all season because they have no defense, right? Um, and that's no disrespect to Tech fans. It's just you guys. You have a great offense. You can put up points, but I don't see a defense. It feels very much like what we were expecting to come into as a Big 12 team, but it's really been about defense and running game the last two years, right? So I think K State runs away against Houston. I think Iowa State definitely beats Tech, but I don't think that's the house money win. I think the house money win is going to be Kansas State Houston.
Okay. Yeah, I agree there a lot, especially when you made those solid points. The other thing I'd add is that Houston has no home field advantage really. Their fans just do not show out. We've been harping on them for weeks, if not months here at this point in the Big 12 huddle, saying Houston fans got to show up and show out because their tickets are cheap. It's in a huge metropolitan area. The traffic might suck, getting there might suck, etc. But that's what every stadium has its drawbacks, no matter what they are. They may not be traffic and driving, but every stadium has its drawbacks. You got to get out to some games here. And Iowa State's good, but are they great? They still to me, I'm picking in a quarterback matchup only. I'm picking Avery Johnson over Rocco Becht. There's no question about it. And that's where I kind of lie with it as well too. And Matt Campbell as a head coach has been up and down. Throughout his tenure with Iowa State, he once was the hottest guy in the room, and then he still stayed at Iowa State, and that's where he still is. And Chris Kleiman up there, he knows what he's doing a little bit. It seems as though he's building out that program with K State, and he's been always been a good
K
name, but I don't
K
think anyone's hired
K
him
State
right.
is K State is just consistent. I think Iowa State. The
Yeah.
big thing for Iowa State this year is they their offense isn't gonna. It's not gonna knock your socks off, right? They're going to be a team that will consistently do things with it. One good thing that I saw when we played them is their coaching was far superior to the coaching that we had on the field. They were able to make adjustments. Um, there were certain situations where, um, they timeout situations or other things. Matt Campbell did a great job managing the game. He managed the time well. He managed the players well. They were able to, um, make changes on the fly, make changes at halftime. So they're a good team, and they have solid defense from the fact that they can turn you over. Now they didn't do that with us, but most teams they turn over. All right. And so that helps your offense too, because it gives you short fields. If they don't score, they give you short fields and they stop your drives. So for me, I think Iowa State is a good team with good coaching, and that's going to win you a lot of games. Are they a great team is this a team that I think could take on, the number one, number two team in the country and win the playoff? As it stands right now, I don't see that happening. I just don't.
Yeah, I give the best chance here, honestly, to the K-State of the whole conference in that scenario. Just as it stands right here today, from what I've seen, I give Avery Johnson and K-State the more of a chance here against the top 5 teams in the country than I do any other Big 12 team. But then after that, it's BYU and then Iowa State, and it's all just by a little bit here and there. There's not big tiers here where it's a big drop off in between any of them, but I do put my money on that. And I I want to talk about each of our games here, but I want to talk about the TCU Baylor game first. Do you
Mhm.
think the TCU Baylor game really? Listen, it's two teams that I would think would form a natural big rivalry in the Big 12 gear because they're just so close proximity wise. They both are private schools. They both are in Texas. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. Keep going. But for this weekend's game for TCU Baylor, what do you think it means for the rest of the Big 12? Anything at all to take away from it? Or is it just kind of a, hey, we're this far in the season. Neither team's really that big of a power. We're just kind of
I
here.
I think to me what it means is tier two, right? So who's going to finish this season for tier two? I think for David Aranda, Dave Aranda matters for his job, right? Um, Other than that,
And Sonny
it's
Dykes too.
I don't
A
think
little
so.
bit, a little
I,
bit. You
I,
mentioned
I
Sonny
don't.
Dykes earlier before we started recording that he
Yeah,
might
but
be in a hottish seat.
I think he's. They're 5-3 right now. We've got 4 games left in the regular season, right?
They also
I
get to
don't
play
see
Oklahoma
that.
State here,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we all know the
I don't know what's coming there. Yeah.
start calling them the Smashing Pumpkins because it's wow. But
Hang on, I got it.
for me right now, I don't think it matters. I think it matters for tier two. I think it matters more for their fan bases and what they see their teams and where their program is from here. And I think for Dave Aranda, it means his job. That's not this game, but how the rest of the season goes, and it's important for that.
All right. Well, I'm going to say here with the Arizona State Oklahoma State game this weekend, I think what it would mean for Oklahoma State is a ton. It would mean there is a great win on homecoming, a night game. It mean great for the fan base and morale. It'd be the first conference win this season, but it also, if it's a win of any type, would be how did we not win another one besides this one? I think it'd be a head scratcher there because beating Arizona State, we know what they're going to do. They're going to run the football, and we are not good at stopping the run. So if Oklahoma State wins, it's because, oh my gosh, we figured out how to outscore them, which would be crazy because our offense doesn't look great. Or it would be, wow, how do we stop their offense from running the ball? Now, on the flip side for Arizona State, I think it'd just be another great notch in their belt, another great win for them on the road against a team that's beaten them the past 2 years in a row, Oklahoma State, because we have played them non-conference wise 2 years coming into this one. So this is the third in a row. And Arizona State would say, hey, you know what? Like we got this one, kind of the we got next thing. And it put a stamp here at least on how they're doing.
Calvin, I think for me, I don't even think Arizona State is looking at it that way. You guys are 0-5 and 3-5, right?
I think
Well,
there's a little bit of Kenny Dillingham coming into saying, hey, you know what? We haven't beat him yet. He was head coach last year. I do think there's a little bit of at least. I'm not trying to make this a bigger deal than it is, though. I mean, yeah, we're 0-5. It'd be a first conference win for us. It's a much bigger deal for Oklahoma State fans than it's Arizona State fans, depending on who wins.
Yeah, I think it's just that Arizona State fans are coming into this expecting to win, right? The one big thing that it would do for Arizona State is it gets them bowl eligible. So
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest piece of it. I think the expectation though is that they come in and win.
They're favored, by the way. I mean, this would not be a shock. It should not be a shock to Arizona State fans, but I do think it'd be a little bit more of a confidence booster for the team.
Well, I think it could be, especially if their quarterback comes back and plays well.
Yeah, and
Ribs,
he's
bruised.
playing apparently too.
Yeah, but playing and playing well are two different things, right?
Yeah, but
When
if you're
you've got
saying
ribs,
playing comma well, or if you're saying just playing well, that's the key difference here. And yeah, I want to be specific. He is playing.
yeah. So I think for them, they're going to be watching their quarterback and looking to see how his ribs are, because I can tell you, having played, and I've never had bruised ribs or broken ribs or anything, but those things, when you get them, the only thing you can do is not rest them, and they don't fix themselves very quickly. So, um, I think for me, that's the biggest takeaway for this game. I think they're expecting to win. I think that's the biggest takeaway for their game, and they're bowl eligible, which I think is great. And kind of validation for Kenny Dillingham, because you know he's what I love about Kenny Dillingham is his passion, and I think the team will feed off of that going into the rest of the season. If they win this and they get bowl eligible, they've got 2 losses on the season. I think they have some belief going into the stretch.
Yeah, I totally agree. What do you think about your guys' matchup here this weekend? I mean,
Oh,
UCF.
it was
Yeah.
funny if you listen to the big like our Big 12 Huddle brethren. I did a segment on their show when we previewed this show, and those guys are just, I mean, you think UCF fans are down. Arizona, wow. Like I think Arizona fans had big expectations, and they haven't done really much of anything, right? I think the difference between UCF and Arizona right now is the expectations of Arizona fans are lower. I think our unanswered questions are bigger, right? So if we start Dylan Risk and he plays really well this game, um, I think I think our thought process going into this is less, are we down on the team and do we have more question marks that get answered? Because the team, the fan base has already kind of given up on Gus for the season, and he's going to have to do a lot to dig out of the hole to earn the fan base trust back. And I'll say this too, you mentioned the coordinators. Our defensive coordinator, we brought in Ted Roof as a means to shore up the the defense, the run D, right? And then secondly, to help Addison Williams mature, because he was, I don't know if you remember, but T. Will left us, went to Arkansas to be the defensive coordinator, is doing well. They promoted Addison Williams internally, had never been a defensive coordinator before, did not do so well, brought in Ted Roof to help him mature. The defense actually has made progress, and especially the last 4 games. So it surprises me that happened. And Ted Roof actually on Monday night did the coordinator's press conference, right? Offensively, Tim Harris, we had Gus Malzahn had his challenges with Christy Malzahn's health. He took a step back, brought in a former UCF great to be offensive coordinator. Took those coordinator duties away, went back to coordinating the offense and calling the offense. We won 3 games, but didn't do much different than what the former coordinator did. Came back this year and now has handed the offense over to Tim Harris. Here's the thing. In that press conference, Gus Malzahn, one, you don't fire your defensive coordinator and let them do the press conference the night before. I mean, literally 7:00 at night, you're doing a press conference for the game week. And then at 11:30, you're doing the head coach is doing a press conference. He had no answers. He was asked some specific questions about who's taking over what. He didn't have answers for that. So that was a situation where he was told, you're going to do something, maybe not specifically who you're going to fire, but you're going to do something. You're going to do it now because we've lost the fan base and we've lost everything else. So I think for UCF fans, this game means, all right, is all about Dylan Risk. Is he finally the quarterback that can hit the broadside of a barn and allow us to stretch the defense enough for a running game to be successful? I think that's the biggest question coming out of that. And with a win against Arizona, and it is the space game for those of you that keep up with that. And we have never lost a space game.
Oh,
If
we remember
Gus,
the space game last year real
yeah.
well.
So, if Gus Malzahn loses the space game, uh, yeah, that's going to be added pressure. So he better win this week. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, fingers crossed that that's at least a fun game to watch because I don't necessarily care who wins at all because we're all just sitting over here just on the side. We don't play either of you guys this season. Maybe we all three could play each other at the end of the season, though. Arizona, UCF, and Oklahoma State, and figure out who's the real worst team here. But we may not need to with Oklahoma State wise. We're still the winless team, so I'm not trying to talk on my butt too much. I I will say the Arizona guys, they're down. They feel like this
They
was
are
the
way
season.
down.
I don't know how much they've talked to me though recently because it is a rough go here. I mean, we were projected to finish third overall in the conference preseason wise, and it is just returning 20 starters. I reached a certain point here where it's just his fatigue. It's just his optimism fatigue. And now I'm just completely cratered. I'll be back up next week here and I'll be all jovial about Oklahoma State and be like, well, hey, basketball season's about to tip off and football, this is what happened. Something look halfway good with the backup running back and the guy behind
Well,
Ollie will be halfway decent. I mean, there'll be things to take away. Don't get me wrong. But like, the Arizona guys are very bleak about it, but I want to say like I think between the three college huddle, yeah, I mean the Utah man, Wildcat Radio 2.0, and then CGA 2 or myself here, all three of us are just licking our chops here because we're going, man, we're supposed to have seasons like K State. Maybe we drop one a game on the
well,
road. It'd be
so
tough,
you
but
know
other than
what?
that, we'd be undefeated.
So was UCF, right? And the expectations going all in with KJ Jefferson was that was going to be the season, and Gus hyped it up all season long too. And then KJ Jefferson was about the biggest bust you could have at quarterback, right? And we were waiting for him to turn it on. This team, unfortunately, has been one quarterback away from a great season, and it's been ineptitude. I mean, Ja'Curry Brown, he passed for for 100 under 100, like right at 100 yards the first game, under 100 yards the second game that he played. Now he ran the ball, he ran 154 yards, right, which is great. But it makes you very one dimensional, and you load the box, you spy the quarterback, and that shuts it down, right? So we need someone to be able to stretch the field passing the ball, and both of them have performed woefully. And so we're hoping Dylan Risk, who's more of what KJ Jefferson was supposed to be, which is a pocket passer who can escape, can run the offense effectively and give us some light. Remember that copium versus hopium? Give us some hope, because the rest of the team has fared fairly well. We've just been hurt at the quarterback position, and just goes to show you it is the most important position on any team.
Yeah, I think I just figured out a whole great offseason topic for us for the Big 12 huddle, which is drafting your favorite quarterback from each Big 12 team so far.
Ooh,
And that'll be a, great offseason topic here of just going through. Maybe we'll cap it at like a decade back or something because I don't want to bring up too much of the old Big 12 where it still has Nebraska in it. But also, I don't really want to have to try to figure out, wait, who was playing for Colorado back in, '06 or something. Not that I wouldn't remember off the top of my head, but I wouldn't. So I'll ask you this too here. Which would be the most shocking upset here this weekend? Because I actually don't think it'd be Houston beating K State. I think the most shocking upset this weekend, maybe it would be, but I think the most
I think
shocking
it would be
upset would be
Houston beating K-State. I
yeah.
think that would be 100% the biggest upset.
I I could see K State just losing the game because it's an away game. I think they'd be the most definite win, but I don't know. I mean, Tech going into Ames, I just think that one's close there as well. Maybe that one's just closer on the certainty part of it for Iowa State winning. But any of these 5 of the games here that you think go the opposite way of the current favorites or be more intriguing before we wrap up?
I think Baylor and TCU is going to be an intriguing game. I think that's going to be a close one. So if you're going to, we haven't said much about watching Baylor games and making them interesting, right? But I think that's going to be an interesting game. I think UCF Arizona could be an interesting game depending on how the quarterback plays on UCF side. We do get some defensive backs back that we didn't have last week against BYU because they were hurt, and that will help. And I think Texas Tech and Iowa State could be an interesting game as well, just simply because Tech has a great offense. I mean, Morton has thrown for 2,063 yards on the season and has a 17-2 TD to interception ratio, or 3 TD to interception ratio. So you've got a Brooks, who's almost 1,000-yard receiver already, 8 games in. So I think you're going to see some offensive firepower there. The question is how does Iowa State's defense, can Iowa State turn them over when you've got a 17-3 TD to interception ratio from Morton? Otherwise, I think Texas Tech could surprise Iowa State. They're not going to stop them, but they can out offense them if Iowa State doesn't get the turnovers.
Yeah. Well, is there any game here that we want to talk about besides Big 12? Do you want to give an Ohio State, Penn State prediction?
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Only care about the Big 12, right?
I honestly, let me put it to you this way.
It's just
I won't say
two top.
I know it just means more, but I don't.
Topic, yeah.
Yeah, I don't watch any other games outside of the Big 12 anymore. Like, let me put it to you this way: as a UCF fan, when we were in the American, I only watched our games. I could not have cared less about anybody else in the American, right? When we got to the Big 12, I got to a point where it was like, all right, I'm going to I get to care about the other games in the Big 12 because I want the conference is something we're proud to be a part of. It's not necessarily that we're trying to get out of. And we kind of came together in a way where the conference and today's football teams that represent the conference, we're trying to battle for, relevance or branding or whatever since Texas and OU went away, right? So I think there's that realignment. I don't know how to call it, but there's a sense of oneness within the Big 12. So I care how the Big 12 performs. It's fun football to watch. You're not going to see, the same teams win consistently over and over and over and over again. There's crazy fourth quarter finishes. If a team goes up 28 points, it doesn't matter because by the end of the game, it's still going to be fun. So I watch Big 12 football because it interests me and they're good teams and I'm proud of the conference that I'm in. Quite frankly, I don't have the time, nor do I care about any other of the conferences. I may flip through them every once in a while, right? But I'm not the guy who lives in Florida that's watching SEC football because I live in the Southeast. I could not care less what UF or anybody else, Georgia, LSU, or anybody else is doing. They're not relevant to me until playoff time and only when the Big 12 representative is there. And before that, since we were in G5, it didn't really matter because we didn't get to play any of them anyway because the system was rigged. So it really didn't matter to me. So maybe I have a different perspective than some of the other fan bases, but I could not care less about any other conference until we get to the playoff. And even then, now only because we have a Big 12 team in the playoff.
I'll say this. I always want to watch fun football. I do not think of Big 10 football as fun football. I think of the Big 12 as fun football. Key thing is, you're right. 28-point lead's not safe. That's exciting. A 7-point lead being not safe, whatever, a 13-16 win of Georgia over Kentucky, but barely, and then Georgia loses later on because Alabama has literally just all this type of stuff here is just what I'm getting at. It's just back and forth, and there's all of this. Hey, one conference is so deep, and the other conference is so topsy turvy,
but that's BS too.
That's what I'm saying though, is that whole debate of like saying, oh, the Big 12 is just, there's no good teams in the Big 12 here because they're all beating each other. But then countering that and saying the SEC is so deep because they've still got so many strong teams. It's just talking out of both sides of your mouth, and that's what I don't like. So I do like watching just one conference keying on to the Big 12, even though I know I'm going to watch Penn State, Ohio State, because it's going to be one of the 4 from multi-view from YouTube TV. So it's going to be one of those games because there's only 5 games this weekend for the Big 12. Now, I honestly will be watching that game because it's on early in the day and Oklahoma State plays at night. So that's also part of this. Top matchup earlier on in the day. College game day lead right into it. I normally try to watch some college game day here and kind of enjoy the Saturday just as a ritual at this point. Not that I'm paying too much attention to college game day anymore, to be honest, but still, it's fun to at least say I had it on. And I'll be excited. I'm going to Oklahoma State game this weekend. Fingers crossed, we beat Arizona State. I don't necessarily project whatsoever. I'm hopeful though. I'll always remain hopeful if I'm going to the game, especially. And want to get your final thoughts here on UCF and then the game this weekend here before we close it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we ever actually picked. Do you want to run through and actually pick who we think's going to win each game real quick, especially since we
Yeah,
only have 5 to pick?
yeah.
So,
Let's do it here. Yeah. First off, you want to start out with we'll just go in order of time wise. So why don't we just start off with UCF Arizona?
well, I'm going to pick Arizona. No, just kidding. I'm going to
Yeah, I was
pick
gonna say.
UCF. 30. I actually picked 32-28. I mean, the only reason for that, Arizona hasn't scored, I think, more than 21 points or 26 points all season long, with the exception of their first game where they dropped like 63 on New Mexico State. I believe it was New Mexico State. However, our question is going to be the secondary because we had some injuries. We're expecting 2 of those 3 starters back. If they don't come back, that's going to be a problem. Kobe Hudson was originally got injured in this past game. Is supposed to be wasn't expected to come back, but he made a post on Twitter today, making it seem like he's going to be back. And we've got a new quarterback situation, so I do think we can shade the secondary and stop their number 1 passing threat, and that's pretty much all Arizona has from an offensive perspective. So I think it could be worse than that, and a lot of it's going to depend on our quarterback situation. But either way, I think we win the space game, and Gus Malzahn better hope he does.
All right. Well, you convinced me there. I'm definitely picking UCF as well. K State at Houston. I think we're both picking K State.
100%.
All right. That one's easy. Tech at Iowa State. I'm picking Iowa State and Rocco Becht. I do not trust Tech, especially after they played Baylor the way they did at their own home stadium. And then seeing Baylor play Oklahoma State just makes me think, wow, is Baylor that good or really anything at all to tell from that? So with the transition to property here, I thought Tech was kind of that paper tiger you were talking about here earlier with a couple other teams. And until they really played another good Big 12 team, they weren't winning, and that's been the case. So I'm going to pick Iowa State to stay undefeated. What about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely going Iowa State for a couple reasons. One, it's at home. Number 2, Iowa State has a good team on both sides of the ball. They don't have to have a great team one way or the other. And I think because they have a good defense, they will defeat Texas Tech.
All right. And then we've got, of course, the Oklahoma State Cowboys inviting Arizona State into Go Bacon Stadium here as the 6 o'clock game. I'm picking OSU. I picked OSU by 1 early in the week. I'm not going to go back on my word here. I'm not feeling great or strong about it, but it is very tough for me as a Oklahoma State fan. Just by 1? Is that what you're getting at? What's the
Is
deal?
that what you just said?
Yeah, just
You
by 1
said it.
point. 28-27 by 1 point.
Okay. That's
Why?
interesting. I don't
Well, I
know.
think
I
it's gonna
just
be a nail biter. I don't
okay.
trust us in rainy games. That's what's gonna be. I do think Arizona State's gonna be really good. I do think as well that it'll come down to maybe a missed field goal from Arizona State trying to win it, or there'll be some fluky deal that happens because it is just a weird games in November, because it will be November, in Stillwater, like we played BYU last year in Stillwater and won in overtime, but missed a PAT to send it to overtime. If we just made the PAT, wouldn't have gone overtime. I could keep going for years about this. There are weird games in Stillwater at night, in the rain. I also went to that game last year as well, too, against BYU. So, yeah, that's kind of how I see it playing out. Just a real fluke of a game here, and that's how Oklahoma State wins. I don't see this as a way that we think week after week after going off to this one that, oh yeah, Oklahoma State's got a plan now or a way to beat teams. I don't think there's anything like that going on.
Yeah, I think for me, as crazy as this to say, right? Ollie Gordon should be in a game like that where it's wet and rainy. It's going to be a ground game. It's going to be Scadaboo versus Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon hasn't done as much as he did last year. Scadaboo has really come on, and I think Arizona's defense is, or Arizona State's defense is fairly good. So the question is going to be, what is Arizona State's quarterback situation going to be? If it's a low scoring game, unfortunately, I think it favors Arizona State. Um, and I'm going to pick Arizona State for the win against Oklahoma State. But you guys are due. So who knows? It's the Big 12. You guys are due.
If it's not this one, I think it'll be next week against TCU. We're due. It's just at TCU. And if it's not that one, it'll be home when we play Tech for senior day. There's no way we're beating Colorado
And if
last
it's not
season.
that
I'll say
one,
that. There's no way we're letting the last game of the season at Colorado against Colorado. There's no way. I'm not going to keep going with it. Then the last matchup we have of the night here at 7 p.m. Central is TCU at Baylor. I want to pick Baylor just out of pure respect because the way they beat Oklahoma State last weekend. But I'm nervous here. I'm willing to be swayed either way. What are you thinking?
yeah, I mean, to me, I think the thing that's going to be interesting is Hoover has been great. 2,600 yards for the season, 19 TDs. However, 8 interceptions. Last year, he wasn't, and earlier on, he wasn't as turnover prone, but he's kind of got the turnover bug right now. And, you know, to me, Baylor has been doing better defensively. And that's David Aranda's game. So this could be a game where Baylor wins, but I've got to pick TCU because they've kind of turned it on the last couple of weeks. So, I picked Baylor to win a quote unquote surprise game the last 2 weeks, right? But well, did I pick OSU or Baylor? I think I did pick Baylor again last week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pick against Baylor this week, and I'm gonna pick for TCU. I think the story of the game is going to be whether Josh Hoover can control the turnovers.
Yeah, I always want to go to just to like, hey, how are you doing in conference at this, at this point in the season when I do think it's more of just a toss-up game. And TCU's got better Big 12 record overall, but it is so incredibly hard for me to get some of these games TCU has played out of my mind here. They just are always playing games down to the end of the wire. I know they played you guys down
That's
to the end of the
because
wire.
they play one half of great football. The
It,
problem is they
yeah,
have all season long not put together a full game of great football. Their offense is on for a half, and if it's at the first half, then they're going to sputter in the second half. If it's the second half that they're great, they're going to be slow on a slow start in the first half. So it's a really, really, really interesting team because they have not put it together for a whole game yet.
yeah, I was going to say they lost to you guys by 1, but yet they won last week by 1, the reverse score of 35-34. And then going back to that, they won in Salt Lake City by 6, but only scored 13 points. They just do not show any consistency. Very, very hesitant to pick TCU, but maybe it means they can win in different ways. So we'll be different in 1 point here besides the Oklahoma State matchup. And I'll say I'm going to go ahead and pick TCU. Don't necessarily have too grave a reasoning except for just kind of a gut feeling here that they'll play well at Baylor. And I saw how Baylor played last week. And if basically TCU can stop the run, they're good. Oklahoma State could not stop the run against Baylor, as I know firsthand. And that's how Baylor won. So it real disappointing loss there from the Pokes. But I don't think TCU's that disappointed. And I think Sonny Dykes is thinking, hey, you know what? I don't want anyone talking about any hot seat that I could be on this offseason heading into 2025. I don't want it at all. So I'm going to go ahead and beat the Baylor Bears. And it's kind of the only reason here. So We'll go ahead and end it out here. Night Bengal, as always, here. Thanks so much for joining on this episode here and co-hosting it with me. If you're not already, make sure you follow at the College Huddle. It's actually at College Huddle on X and Twitter for all of the updates here from all the College Huddle podcast. Then follow at Big 12 Huddle here for a feed of all of the Big 12 news and notes from the College Huddle partners for all the schools. Follow at the CGA Tour on Twitter and Instagram, as well as anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For my podcast, Welcome to State and Night Bengal, where can everyone find you guys?
You can find me personally at Night Bangle, and you can also find us at the Nighted Ones. As far as the content is concerned, we have the biggest presence or most active presence right now on Twitter. We're building out our Instagram and other social channels right now. For our content, you can hear us, view us on YouTube, and hear us on most of your podcast channels. And if you want to check out Arizona's podcast this week for whatever reason, even if you're not an Arizona fan, I will be featuring on there this week as well to talk about the Blues and leave the comment that at least we're not the butt game. So I'll leave that. I'll leave it there for this week. Thank you so much, everyone. I just want to give another quick shout out. Thank you for supporting us with the views. Make sure you follow, like, subscribe. And if there's, tell your friends and let's keep growing the channel. We appreciate all of the support.
We definitely do. And go Pokes.
Go Knights.